right, so congratulations on reaching the end of another course section. So as always, let's take a few moments to review everything we learned. This section was our first introduction to hooks, and we began with the most famous hook in React, which is useState. A hook is simply a function that we import from the React library that hooks into, or in other words, emulates existing functionality from React class components. The goal of hooks is to be able to do everything we do within React class components, but now in functional components and usually with less code and less complexity. The advantage of moving away from class-based components is we move to more traditional JavaScript ideas, functions, invocations, constants, etc. We no longer have to worry about our class declaration syntax or inheriting from React.component. We don't have to get confused about the this keyword or binding it correctly so it has access to set state. We don't have to worry about destructuring state or props. Everything is now available in line within the body of our functional component. And that is one of the primary advantages of hooks and how they are able to reduce the amount of code that we need to write. So as far as useState, the functionality that hook is allowing us to have is state within our functional components. State is still the same thing. It is just data that is going to change over time, usually over the component's existence. So the useState hook is a regular function. We import it, we invoke it, and we pass it the initial value of the state. And that can be anything. That can be a Boolean, a string, a number. If it's data that's changing over time, it is state, and we just need to provide it a starter value to kick things off with. The useState hook will return an array of two elements. The first array element is going to be the current state value, and the second array element is going to be a function that will update that state value. So we simply use that function throughout our component, for example, when the user clicks a button, and that will trigger a state update to that single piece of state, and that will, as always, force a component re-render. So the React concepts stay the same, it's just that the syntax changes a little bit. As we talked about, the common convention is whatever name you're going to give to a piece of state, which is the first array element, your setter function to update that piece of state, the second element in that array, you're going to call that function set followed by the name of your state. So if your state is first name, your function will be called set first name. If your state is called country, then your setter function will be called set country, etc. And I don't believe that is a technical requirement, but you're going to see that pattern 95% of the time because it is a common standard within the React community. The next thing I want to talk about is simply how we replace old class component functionality, but now within the body of a function, because we lose access to certain things, such as the this keyword, but we also gain a lot of benefits simply from being within the same scope for all of our logic. So for our former class component state, we simply break down that object of properties into multiple set state calls. And there are other approaches. You can actually use state with an object, but I tend to prefer to bring it down, bring it smaller into multiple use state calls so that each one of those original state properties becomes its own set state invocation. And now I have each one of those setter functions to update just that piece of state. For former instance methods that we previously referenced with the this keyword, we simply replace those methods with inline functions, arrow functions, or regular functions directly in the body of our component. So there's no more need to use the this keyword, you're just using regular JavaScript syntax. And then the benefit of both of those things, both our state and our inline functions, is those names and references exist in our function scope, in the same block scope as our component. So when we are returning JSX at the very bottom of our function component, we have access to all those names and references. We can reference those pieces of state directly. There's no need to destructure them or anything like that from this.state. And we can similarly reference those functions we declared above, which can do things like establish event handlers for when the user clicks a button or types into something. So everything is within that scope of the function body. So it's all just then and there, and you're able to reference it directly into your JSX. And that obviously is very, very convenient. And also does some good type checking in case, for example, you forget to type a function name or a piece of state correctly. It will tell you that because it will immediately find the mismatch compared to something like this dot, which sometimes may not be recognized simply because it's kind of elsewhere in the class component body. All right, so hopefully both the benefits of hooks and the syntax of hooks make sense. We saw when we ran our test suite that our React testing library was still able to run the same tests and pass everything with no modification. And that's just to show you that hooks enable the exact same type of React behavior. So while it is a new syntax, it's the same old React ideas that we're used to. It's still a single page application library with a bunch of reusable chunks of the UI called components that have state that changes over time. It's the same idea. Hopefully you can see that. It's just a more different, more modern, more shorter syntax to accomplish the same goals. So hopefully this section has been beneficial, and I will see you in the next lesson.